Okay, let's tackle the big issue of shielding our patients and why we don't need to shield our patients anymore, which was a crazy concept a few years ago. But first, let me just say I feel a little bad about the last video because I'm not a showman. I'm not on here to sing and dance for you and do all these graphics that zoom in and make whooshing sounds. I'm here to provide knowledge. I'm here to educate. I do it in kind of a dry lecturing kind of way. I was going to apologize for that, but I'm not going to apologize. That's just my teaching style. I'm here to share with you what I know and hope to answer questions for you that you can't find elsewhere. The last video on how to become a rad tech, it's just talking about such basic information. It just kind of lackluster for me, but it's a baby step in the series of explaining everything we do across the spectrum, which is a big daunting task if you know what all we do. But I'm slowly tackling it, and so I said in that last video, short and brief, and said how to become one by going to school, basically. And so anyway, here I am today is kind of a fun topic. It's controversial for sure. And 3 years ago, it was very controversial. But I'll do some screen sharing and we'll kind of go back and forth. But to start it out, everybody knows that when you go to get an X-ray, they typically put maybe you're getting a chest X-ray and they put a lead shield across your waist, or maybe women are getting a mammogram and they might put a thyroid shield on or something, or whatever you need shielding for, gonadal shielding. Everybody's used to that. They're used to getting shielded, and many patients ask for shielding when they come in. And I wrote, let's see, I wrote an article. I'm going to try to be precise with my dates here for you so you can understand the timeline. It's right here. To shield or not to shield is my article, and I'll share that with you here in just a second. But it was published on my blog June 9th, 2019. So we're in December 2022 now. So it's been a few years. But let me hop back over to two screens still isn't enough, I'm telling you. I'm going to screen share. This is well, this is my blog, the Radiologic Technologist.com. We're in the survival guide over here at this point. This is going to be around episode 15 or so. But I wrote this article to shield or not to shield. That is the question, because the AAPM and the ACR, American College of Radiology, and American Academy of Physicists in Medicine, came out and said, you guys don't need to shield anymore. It's a thing of the past. Just trust us. It's all good. Don't shield anymore. And the radiography world just went on fire because we are ingrained from day one in schooling that you shield patients. And there was just no question about it. Our mantra is ALARA, ALARA, which is as low as reasonably acceptable or as low as reasonably achievable, which is to say we give the least amount of radiation to our patient to achieve the best results for the image, right? There's no doubt that radiation has negative effects on the body. So to take away the shielding just went against nature. It went against everything we were ever taught. So I reached out to the head physicist who started this whole craziness, Dr. Marsh, right here, and I interviewed her for an hour. And so I'll post a link to this blog post in the comments section, and you can go listen to it. It's a great interview. So we talk about how she, was doing the study. She basically just realized we've been doing this forever. Maybe it's time to look at it, and that's a beautiful philosophy. The worst thing you can say when somebody says, well, why do you do that? Well, just because we've always done it that way. Always take a look at the things that have just been done the same way forever and reevaluate them from time to time. So that's what she did, this physicist, and she began to look at all the different aspects of shielding and what happens when RadTech's shield. And I'll unpack this for you basically, because that's what this video is for, so that you can understand why we don't need to shield anymore. And now that it's December 2022, there are lots of hospitals out there that have stopped, and they've put out actual. The problem was when this came out, those that understood it and agreed with it, we had no legal protection because none of our accrediting bodies came out with a statement pro no shielding. So we could still be held accountable down the road if we stopped shielding patients and something went awry because our organizations didn't say it was okay yet. Because the AAPM doesn't cover us, and neither does the ACR. The ACR is for the radiologists. So the ACR did release a statement that they will be reviewing what I talked about in this article, but it wasn't until, and I'll show you the article, it wasn't until like 3 days ago that the ASRT came out with a statement saying, okay, we're going to back it. We're going to back it up. And it took that long before the wheels turned and our organization got on board. But we saw it coming, and I'll just run through it with you. So, yep, it was a big buzz in the community about the whole thing, and it was about stopping the shielding of our patients. This meme is a joke. There was actually, if you're new to the field, which is who you should be if you're at this point in the series, there was this thing going around that if you wore yellow, it protected you from radiation. And so this was a big joke that we all just wore yellow, so we didn't need lead at the time. We just wore yellow. So I posted it in the Facebook group, which you should be familiar with that by now, the Radiologic Technologist Facebook group. What do you guys think of this thing? And people were just all over the place. They were livid. You can't do that. I'll never stop shielding. And it just pointed out that people weren't even considering evaluating the science behind it. They wouldn't even consider, maybe we should take a look at this. Maybe they're right. Maybe we should read more. We're in a field of science. Radiologic technology is all about science and technology. And if you're not willing to stop and read some scientific papers every now and then and see what's going on, you're not going to be the best in your field. Let's just put it that way. So, here's just some comments from people in there about, people are using AEC. What do you mean you're using AEC? We only use manual techniques. We don't, automatic exposure control, if you don't know, is a way of setting the machine to control the amount of radiation you give instead of you telling it exactly how much to. It's kind of like driving a car with your foot on the gas pedal. That's manual versus locking in the cruise control and letting the car just drive on its own at a certain speed, and you don't have to touch the gas. AEC is kind of like that. It automatically does it for you. So I just showed in this, these comments about how everybody was livid and upset and there's no way and this is crazy and all that stuff. So Interstage Left, the American Association of Physicists in Medicine, came out and said, quote, obscure anatomic information and interference with the automatic exposure control of the imaging system is what happens when you shield. And at the time, the actual AAPM policy that discusses the stopping of shielding is PP32A, and it's the position statement on the use of gonadal and fetal shielding. So I linked to it, right? So you can go look at it and you can read it yourself. But the basic argument was that shielding, there's 3 parts to it, but the basic argument is that shielding can both potentially compromise the exam and lead to more repeats of the exam or negatively affect the automatic exposure control. So let me break that down for you. To negatively affect it, in other words, if you had to do, there's a pelvis over here, way over here, but if you had to take an image of somebody's pelvis, you're supposed to shield the gonads right in the middle, right? And if you were imaging, like that's actually a femur right there, if your gonad shield overlapped that femur at all, then you clipped the anatomy that you were intending to X-ray, and you had to repeat the exam. In other words, if I'm imaging my entire beard and I put a gonad shield over here and I clip this little portion, You don't know it till after you get the X-ray back, or after the exposure is completed. Now that we've got digital radiography, you can see it the second after you take it. But in the past, you had to go run the film and take a look at it and go, crap, I clipped some anatomy. I got to go back and reshoot it. Now you push the exposure button, it pops up right on the screen, but it's still too late. You already exposed that patient. So what the studies found, this physicist, Dr. Marsh, found was out of thousands of X-ray exams where a rad tech put a shield on a patient and then took an X-ray, they clipped or obscured some of the anatomy that they were supposed to be looking at, and therefore had to repeat the exam. What does that mean? That means that patient got dosed with radiation a second time. And the math comes out to say if they would have just not used the shield at all and just done one X-ray, they would have received less radiation in total, even without the shield, than having to repeat it twice and getting twice the dose. The second part of that statement negatively affect the automatic exposure control. So this AEC, think of it as a sensor, and when you shoot an X-ray beam at somebody, this AEC receives it and controls how much is going. It's like a cutoff. It's like an automatic cutoff, like when you're putting gas in your car and you've got it locked on auto pump, and at some point your tank fills up, and when the gas reaches a certain part, it triggers that pump to stop off and kicks that handle out, and it stops. That's kind of what the AEC does. It senses the beam, it knows when it's received enough to penetrate the body or the structure it's imaging, and it shuts off the beam. Well, if you're imaging a pelvis and you've got this little lead shield right in the middle, then the beam that's coming in is hitting that shield and being stopped right there, which makes the AEC tell the machine, keep going, keep going. We haven't received everything we need. Give me more radiation. And you end up getting a higher dose to the patient because that shield is there, screwing it all up, blocking some of it. And therefore, the patient gets more radiation to the surrounding areas, not getting where the lead stopped it, but the surrounding area is getting more because it kind of threw off the AEC a little bit. So if you use that shield, not only did you have a good chance of clipping anatomy if you don't know what you're doing and causing a repeat, but you're also giving more dose to the patient than you would have had you not used the shield at all, right? So there's two negative effects right there to shielding on the same exam. You caused more radiation to the surrounding area around the shield because of the AEC, and you may have to do that twice because you clipped a piece of the anatomy with the shield. Now, the third thing, and I get to it somewhere in the paper, but the third thing is back when we started all this with the lead shielding, like in the 70s, I think it was, when it became official, the X-ray machines we used were much more archaic back then. They performed much poorer. They gave more radiation. They weren't as scientifically advanced as we are now. Now our equipment is so advanced and so, what word would I use? They're just so good at delivering exactly the right dose to exactly the right place that the amount of radiation we receive, and I think I say it in here somewhere, but I want to say it's like 93% less radiation than we gave 30, 40 years ago, right? So we're barely giving any radiation now because our machines are so efficient and we can cone into certain areas. You know, there's lots of things we can do. So let's just continue to make sure I don't miss anything. This part just basically says, you know, we didn't have any legalese backing us if we told the patients we're not shielding and something went wrong. So we talked about that, talked about that. So the onus was on us as rad techs. The American Journal of Radiology that posted an article about this, about time to stop shielding, admitted that shielding patients have been a long-standing practice in the field of radiography and that ceasing the practice may cause concern to the patient. You think? Well, we got a ton of pushback from patients. And the remedy for the concern is the technologist to properly inform the patient upon greeting them for the exam. So the APM and the ACR came out with this, you can stop shielding now, but the entire onus got put on the rad tech to explain it to the patient with no scripting, no, here's what you can say to your patient, no, nothing. Just, hey, just tell me you're just not going to do it anymore. It's not needed. Well, that doesn't fly. It makes us look like we don't know what we're doing. It makes us look like we may be causing harm to the patient. And rad techs push back for obvious reasons. So they went on, American Journal of Radiology went on to say it may be appropriate to inform the patient that the facility does not provide patient shielding for imaging exam because evidence indicates that shielding increases the risk to the patient and provides negligible or no benefit. So I joke with my thing there, my meme. So now you're telling me that putting lead on me may cause an increase in the radiation you're giving me. So I've been getting extra radiation every time I get an X-ray. So it was not unfolding well. So then they said, if you need to shield to make the patient happy, go ahead. It's like, but you just told us to tell them to increase their dose. But now you're saying, but if you want that extra dose, then I'm happy to shield you. So the APM conceded that if shielding a patient due to their own fear and anxiety will allow the capture of a better quality image, go ahead. So in other words, if they're freaking out about you not using a shield to the point where it's messing up your exam, they're saying just give them the lead. If it makes it easier to image the patient and capture a quality image, just use it. And over time, eventually society will catch up to the fact that you don't need lead shielding anymore. So here's where I get into about the equipment. So it's been 40 years since patient shielding was first introduced through the Code of Federal Regulations in 1976, and I'll link it so you can go look at it. In those days, an AP pelvis of a 4-year-old male's testes were registered at approximately 2.5 milligray. By 2012, and now that's 10 years ago, and we've had a lot of advances in the last 10 years, but by 2012, that dose had been reduced to 0.06 milligray, or the reduction of 96%. 10 years ago. This should have been looked at 10 years ago, really, but nobody touched it because it was so ingrained, right? So, blah, 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 blah. So here we are 42 years later, and there's still been no studies at all that have shown that you can pass down issues to your offspring because you got radiation. No hereditary effects from radiation have ever been observed in humans, sourced. So it's time to get educated. And this is what I was saying in 2019. It's time to get educated on the topic. As a rad tech, you need to understand what they're talking about. You can read more about it. I linked to it there. Organizations that had input in this whole thing, the International Radiation Protection Association, the Nuclear Energy Agency, the European Commission. I mean, this was global at this point. So it wasn't just the APM and the ACR chiming in. They actually had hundreds of experts from all over the place chiming in. And so I said, therefore, while this report should be seen as providing decision-aiding recommendations, mainly based on scientific considerations on radiologic protection, the commission's advice will be expected to serve as an input to a final decision-making process. So I was just calling out that we weren't backed by anybody yet. So the science is there, change is coming to our practice. And this is where I was trying to reach out to all the rad techs out there that were just hardcore and not even going to look at it. Nope, it just doesn't make sense. I've been taught to do it. And it's like they all said, not all of them, but that some of them said, this is what I was taught to do, and therefore I shall do it forever. Well, you have to be more open-minded than, especially in the field of science. So I said, I for one to feel a lot better when someone comes along with a policy that covers us, especially since we're the ones on the front lines who are going to get the blowback from the patients. So I said, Tex, please educate yourself, have the training and wisdom to educate your patients, and listen to that 1-hour podcast if you get a chance. So that, in a nutshell, is what happened. And then we have, let's see, where did that? So here is the three days ago, I think it was 3 days ago, the ASRT comes out with a statement. The ASRT supports the elimination of gonadal and fetal shielding, specifically during abdominal and pelvic radiography exams performed by rad techs. And they have to say that because people will say, well, okay, I can stop shielding the thyroid for a chest x-ray or for an abdomen x-ray or whatever. But they obviously you have to protect the gonads. So I'll remove that one or whatever, but you have to know they're saying you can remove it all. You can even, well, I won't go any further, but so why have the shielding recommendations changed? Because the risk of genetic effects are lower than previously estimated, because it's been 40, 50 years since we did those studies. Improvements of technology have reduced absorbed dose, which I just said. Shielding can interfere with the AEC. Gonadal shielding may obscure important findings. It's difficult to accurately shield the gonads in certain exams, and a significant portion of dose to the ovaries is delivered by internally scattered x-rays that can't be blocked by shielding. So in other words, when you get hit with an x-ray beam, there's this thing called scatter where, when it enters your body, it hits bones or whatever, and it kind of pings around. And they're just saying most of the radiation that you got to your ovaries was because of scatter, which isn't, you can't stop with the shielding anyway. So there you go. Finally, we get backing. This change only affects gonadal and fetal shielding during radiographic procedures. And then they still give themselves an out. But we still support the shielding if it's safe and appropriate, and it reduces excess radiation and it increases patient comfort and confidence. That's yeah. So this change does not affect shielding for occupational exposure. So in other words, rad techs still have to wear it. If you're in the OR all day, we still wear it because we're in it all day. It's not a one-time x-ray for a patient. And then they linked all the stuff. I don't know if they give any credit to the AAPM for starting the whole thing or not. Oh, look, now you have posters that you can get and put up in your department to back you up. So good. So thank you to the ASRT for standing up and backing us on this. Yep, there's the AAPM right there. And the ARRT has a statement. Let's see where that goes. RT update. The ARRT issue statement on gonadal fetal shielding. No date on it. Wonder when they came out with this. Anyway, so there we are. So there we are with the whole, should you shield your patient? Not the answer is no, you don't need to shield your patient. Our machines are so advanced now, it doesn't put out hardly any dose. And if you do shield something, you're likely to block something you're not supposed to. And if you're using your AEC, which most techs do anymore, you're going to get more dose to the surrounding area than you would have had you done a straight technique without shielding. So I hope this has kind of cleared it up. This is kind of a taboo in the field for a long time. I mean, especially at first, it was super sensitive subject, and people were getting irate. Go back and look at the Facebook group post back then. People were not having it. They were not listening, and you're never going to change my mind. And so anyway, that brings out the beautifully illustrates one of the beauties of this Facebook group that I've created. It gives us a platform to share ideas and share comments and opinions in a safe manner, because we don't allow bashing and cursing, and I mean, mild cursing, whatever. I'm not a nanny, but I don't let people just start bashing other people and calling them names and cussing at them. And if you can present yourself professionally, whether you're a rad tech or not, that's the thing. We're open up to non-techs who are asking questions about the field. So if you're not a member of the group yet and you're really interested in this field, you should join the group and be involved. So this was the video on to shield or not to shield in the world of X-ray, which the answer is don't bother, but make sure you educate your patient on why, and go to the SRT and download some free posters to hang in your department. Put them in the changing rooms. That'll help. We need some commercials is what we need. We need some national video, public service announcements or something that explains it to the country once and for all. We're not doing it, and this is why. And thanks for watching. So talk to you guys in the next video.